Hello and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Hanapin Marketing. Our topic for today is 13 tips to manage large accounts. Now, usually the number 13 is pretty unlucky, but hopefully it won't be the case today because we've got a collection of both organizational and technical tips, as well as, some overall account strategy tips that can help you get a handle on how to manage large accounts and make the most of the opportunities found within. So today I have one of the experts here at Hanapin Marketing, none other than Jeff Baum, Associate Director of Paid Search here, also a blogger at PPC Hero, and you can reach out to him at Twitter on @JeffBaum71. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Eric. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine, though I will warn everybody I have been having like a little bit of a frog in my throat, so if I end up coughing, well, I'll try not to cough, but I'll definitely sound a little bit rough while I work through it. But thank you very much for your understanding. Preemptively, just wanted to get that out there. And yeah, my name is Eric Couch. I'm a Senior Account Manager here at Hanapin Marketing, also a blogger at PPC Hero, and you can find me on Twitter at eCouch11. So, to begin with, if you wanted to join the conversation, you can include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your Twitter tweets, or you can just use the webinar question box to send us questions.
All right, we'll start off with today's live poll question. The first question is, how long have you been in PPC? Less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or 5 or more years?
Yeah, so you'll see that pop up in the webinar box. I'm not sure if it'll be over on the right or the left. Wherever it shows up, you can answer it there. But in terms of experience here, so I know I fall pretty firmly, kind of splitting the difference or skewing a little bit closer to 3 years, but in the B range. And Jeff, I know you're an elder statesman of our group, doing this for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, I'm coming up on 11 years now, so I've been referred to as the senior citizen of PPC. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I guess it is what it is, right? I think we all want to stay young.
I think I will go out on a limb and say it's a good thing. So, in terms of our poll results, it seems like the majority of responders are in the 1 to 3 year range, but we have a pretty good spread of folks also in 3 to 5 years and then 5+ years too. So, Jeff, you're not alone. Just wanted to put that out there. You can feel comfortable. You're among friends here.
Great. Love to be among friends.
All right. So our second live poll question, so number 2, how do you manage your accounts? So I manage it myself. I'm part of a team that manages it. I outsource my account management, or I'm rethinking how my account is managed. So based on today's topic, I'm kind of assuming that we'll have a few people in the A's, but the B's, maybe even C's, depending on just how large these accounts are, it's possible we could have a wide spread of just about anybody here. But I know having managed large accounts myself and managing large accounts now, doing it alone, managing it just by myself, that's a tall order. So if we have a lot of you who are in that range, kudos to you, and hopefully we can help you out. So the poll results, wow. So 57% are in the managing it yourself range. So a lot of sort of Iron Men carrying the load on their back. So 57% are managing it yourself, and 43% are part of a team that manages it. So no surprises there. When it comes to large accounts, the teams are usually involved. All right, so without further ado, we can dive into our 13 tips. So to begin with, I'll hand it off to Jersey Jeff Baum. So Jeff, what do you got for us today?
Great, thanks, Eric. The first tip that I have for managing a large account is to start off by doing some budget management planning. Throughout my career, I've had my bosses or my clients come to me, the 15th of the month, the 20th of the month, and say, things are just going great. I really want you to start increasing budget, really want to ramp up the spend and, get us more leads or get us more sales. And, I would do that, and I would wind up losing a day or two of doing the analysis, in the account to figure out, which campaigns, which keywords, ad groups that I can push. So what I've started to do is plan for that up front. So instead of having to do that analysis after the fact, what I tried to do is have like a hit list of those campaigns, those keywords, those ad groups that I can go right to and know that I can turn them on when I need to ramp up the account. Consequently, I get the latter question more, which is uh, we need to pull back on budget. And again, it's the 15th, it's the 20th, it's the 25th of the month, and the client or the company needs to pull back on spend, and we need to have that plan in place too, where we don't lose that time figuring out what we need to kind of turn the volume down on. Again, just having that list where I can go right to a set of campaigns or keywords and ad groups and being able to turn them off. And then finally, something that's very important is our accounts grow more complex, meaning it's not just Google and Bing anymore. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, and a million other avenues that you can go in now, is to have a plan to follow the success within your account and be able to reallocate the budgets properly. You want to know throughout the month, can I take money from Google where my spend may not be producing as well and be able to put it into Facebook, or move from Facebook, over to Bing. So, have a plan for how you're going to manage your money.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it sounds like, especially for when it comes to like increasing the budget, that's right now, we're just talking about just existing campaigns, like just knowing where you can push inside. Um, no new campaigns, no crazy additions, just purely what exists right now, right?
Yeah, that's correct, because the new campaigns could be an unknown quantity, and you want to have them battle tested first before you sort of put that into your true budget management planning rotation.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And it sounds like you're also basically you're planning for both eventualities. So there's a possibility they could ask to increase the budget or decrease the budget. So you're just saying plan upfront for both.
Yeah, that's correct. You always want to try to anticipate as much as you can, and there's really two avenues. It's either working and you want to increase, or decrease, or not working as well and you want to decrease. So, yeah, having that plan up front has definitely reduced my stress level personally. Plus, it's also been able to speed up my response times to the individual needs of the organization or the client at that particular moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the picture that comes to mind is when I imagine you sitting at home getting these kinds of messages from the clients is that the 15th of the month rolls around and they have like an emergency request to decrease their budget. So then you go over to your budget plan. It's behind a glass case and it says break in case of emergency, and you just bust that out and it's already prepared, kind of like a fire hydrant or anything else that you need to use, like right on demand. So it's a great idea to make sure you plan that in advance.
For sure, and you gave the perfect image of that. We just need to replace the glass every month and be ready to do it all over again.
Absolutely.
The second tip that I have is managing your resources. I know that there's a lot of people today that are here that are sort of the Iron Men, and then they're working on their accounts alone and having to pull the load. So I can kind of give you my experiences with all this. First of all, if you have any additional internal resources within your company, that can pitch in on campaigns, I would suggest that you try to corral them and train them, so when they're needed, you have someone who understands your business. We're fortunate at Hanapin. We have production specialists, and they're sort of the backbone of our company. They spend all day long working on our large accounts, pulling levers and doing analysis and whatnot. But I know that we don't always have that type of additional resource to go to. If your account is large enough, you may have access to a Google or a Bing team. I would suggest using them. They're not just great at kicking around strategies, but they also have extra capacity. So if you need an upload done, or some ad copy written, or some keyword research done that you just can't get to because you're bogged down, I would suggest that you reach out to the search engine reps. I would just say to proceed with a little bit of caution and understand, what their role is. Their role is to grow their business. So Google is gonna, be slanted towards, getting as many clicks as possible, because the clicks is what they're paid off of. But I think if you give proper upfront direction on what you want, they could be a very valuable resource. And then finally, something that worked very well for me when I was working, alone and kind of doing the Iron Man myself, is selectively pulling in freelancers or hiring temps, bringing in vendors, to sort of take some of that grunt work load off, because when we're working on accounts by ourselves, we're the strategist, but we're also the tactician. And as our accounts get larger and larger, it's harder and harder to do both. So I would look at my personal strengths and say, where can I focus on the most and have the most impact? And then those areas where I could be more effective, I would bringing in talent that can supplement me to help me get the job done and move the accounts in the right direction.
Yeah, those are great tips. So, in looking at this list, would you say is it kind of put in order? So, would you say if you have like these things available to you, like internal resources or search engine reps and then outsourcing, is that the order you would proceed through them? Like first go to internal, then moving beyond that?
Yes, I would start with internal because they understand the business and they understand what the ultimate outcome is going to be. And PPC doesn't work in a vacuum. You have to understand what the goals are and little intricacies of the business that you're working on. Search engine reps, I would list them as number two because they are going to have a working knowledge of your business. They're going to spend time talking to you while they're planning strategy and really try to, dive under the hood and understand what the business is trying to accomplish and understand some of the hurdles that we go towards. And then finally, I would list outsourcing as last, just because you're bringing them in from the cold and you have to bring them up to speed. And depending on how quickly you need to bring them in and how quickly they need to get up to speed, I would rather work in internal and search engine reps before I have to go that route and try to bring outsourcers in a little bit down the line before I need a big project, just so I have time to train them and get them familiar with the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what are the biggest pitfalls that you should look for, like with any of these particular, with any of these kinds of resources at your disposal? Is it just making sure they're fully on board with what you're doing and knowing, like your industry and your business, or is there something else to be careful of too?
Sure, I think you have to be mindful of a few things, Eric. When you're working on the internal side and you're sort of locked in the bubble, we tend to look at things as the way we see them, not necessarily as the customer perceives them. So I think we kind of have to get outside ourselves a little bit in order to kind of think of what the customers or our prospects may want. Pitfalls with the search engines, like I previously said, they have a self-interest, and that's to get as many clicks as possible so they can make as much revenue as possible. So just being mindful of that. And then, of course, outsourcing where they're not completely up to speed and it's not their own business. They don't have as much skin in the game. So these are all things that you have to be mindful of and sort of manage all that. All three of these areas could be very successful, but they have to know the expectations and what's needed of them as they're going through a project or assigned to an account.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the like the concerns that we've had both internally and that I've heard other people echo throughout the industry. How do you vet people when you're like looking to outsource? Like, what are the things that you look for people that you want to bring into a project? Because obviously, depending on how much of a control freak you are, like I tend to be, letting someone else in, especially from the outside, and not even like from an engine, can be kind of a daunting prospect. So, how do you get comfortable with that? How do you like make sure you're finding the right people for that?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'm looking for is competency. Do they understand paid search? Do they know how to pull the levers in an account? And what I'm also looking for in, and probably equally as important, is are they trainable? Are they, willing to be coached and led in a direction? If they're not, that's probably not going to work when you're bringing someone in from the outside, especially. So I have to be comfortable in those two areas that they're going to be a good partner and they're going to be, willing to take direction and have our best needs, in mind. They have to, realize that they're working for you and not for themselves. They should absolutely contribute their ideas, but once the direction is set, we want the outsourced people to be able to follow along and execute.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. And I think in terms of the trainability and the competency, like you can also extend that to the internal resources too, because I've seen what you've been able to do personally with people on our team who show that competency but are also trainable and turn them into rock stars. So that's all credit to your management skills on them. So, but those qualities are good when you find them anywhere. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and we also have really great people who are willing to be coached and willing to do the hard work. So that's what makes it easy.
Yeah, whether it's internal or outsourcing. So great tip. Thanks for that, Jeff.
Sure. The third tip I have is to have an optimization plan. So what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides is having an optimization plan and having a growth plan. And when you get into a large account, they're not mutually exclusive. We can do both at the same time. And to be honest, it wasn't until recently that I really grasped onto this idea. So I would focus on the account needs optimization, so I wouldn't think about growth at all. I would just, you know, write new ad copy and test it, or reorganize my ad groups, or pause underperforming keywords or whatnot. And it wasn't particularly organized. So what I learned is to just develop a simple spreadsheet, just like the example I have in the slide. List all your optimization initiatives. Put a description of them down. If you don't put it on paper, they say it's likely not to get done. So I like to have a list of what I want to accomplish on the optimization end, and most importantly, to set expectations for your managers, your clients, and for yourself. You want to put the expected result. You don't want to just have a task list. You want to have something that's going to move the needle. So, for example, if I'm building a new campaign, I want to have an idea of what that's going to deliver, and then to measure the impact of my optimizations later on. Did we hit the expected result? Did we exceed that result? Did we come in under and we have more work to do? So I like to have a plan for how I'm going to optimize, and then schedule it. I like to work on one optimization opportunity per week. I believe in PPC. What's worked best for me is, instead of doing 50 things, okay, let's focus on one thing, do it really, really well, and then move on to the next item. Because we've probably all seen in our accounts where we do too many things at once, and then performance goes a little sideways. We don't know exactly what caused that to happen, or if we've had great success, we have a little bit of a hard time attributing to what brought us that success. So very important to kind of put that on paper and schedule it. It'll keep you on track, and it'll help you monitor results. And I've personally seen great growth in my accounts and improvement in cost per lead by doing this.
Yeah, and I know, especially by putting it down, like your expected result, and then also measuring the actual result. Those are like both key, but the expected result I think is important because it can align. It's basically the 80-20 rule in action. Like you can look at the expected results, like of all the different optimizations and some of the other things you're going to talk about, and see, like, of these are where my priorities should be. So if you only have a fixed amount of time in a week, which most of us do, even though on a large account, you could probably spend, like, you could spend 25 hours a day on any given large account. But this can help you focus on what you should actually be working on, or where you should spend your time to get the most impact.
Oh, absolutely. I think with a big account, the hardest part is getting started. There's so much there and so many different avenues you can go, that it's easy to sort of get either frozen and not do anything, or get in and sort of get lost. So, planning your map ahead of time is going to help things out a lot.
Yeah, it's like I think the actual term for it is like analysis paralysis, or maybe I just made that up. If I did, that's trademarked.
Well,
Uh,
I've had that happen. So whatever you call it, I've caught it before.
I think we all have. Just when you look at, especially a large account with, hundreds of thousands or even millions of keywords, depending on how deep down that rabbit hole you go, putting it down on paper and figuring out just where to start. Um, every journey, every trip starts with one step. So figuring out what that step should be and making sure it's a good one, I think it's important. So whether it's
Absolutely.
optimization or, as we're going to talk about in the next slide, growth, right?
Yep. uh, having a growth plan, I would go about it the same exact way that you would for your optimization plan. So, uh, going through your account and looking where you can increase volume, whether that's sales or whether that's more leads. Go through and create that same map and what the expected results are, and then focus on one growth opportunity per week. So with a large account with so many campaigns, I personally have an account that has hundreds and hundreds of campaigns. So I can work on optimization on one end of the account, and I can work on growth at the other end of the account. And it's sort of a multiplying effect as you put more and more optimizations into place and more growth into place. Down the line, it all sort of comes together, and it's sort of a beautiful thing when it happens, where all of a sudden the lead volume curve starts going up to the right, and you see your costs and your profitability improve because you've laid that solid foundation, and you've been able to do it in a way where one's not bumping into the other and kind of canceling the effects out.
Yeah, and I know in like smaller accounts, and even in some large accounts too, depending on the way you look at it, like the way account managers and PPC folks usually approach it is that, accounts they go in phases. So there are expansion phases where you're introducing new things, you're increasing budgets, you're increasing bids, but as a result, efficiency decreases. So you're going to see a cost per conversion increase. And I mean, you are going to get conversion gains, but you're also going to introduce some inefficiencies because you're testing new things. And then that's usually followed by a contraction phase where you start to cutting out things that don't work and then bringing that CPL back and then sacrificing some of the conversion volume that you gain. But, it's always been that kind of ebb and flow between expansion and contraction, trying to keep some gains, but cutting out things that don't work. But you have to understand that in a large account, it's big enough that you can do both at the same time. So you can increase, you can expand certain areas while you're contracting in others, gain efficiency in some places, cut inefficiency elsewhere, and really kind of have your cake and eat it too, because a large account is big enough to do that, right?
Oh, for sure. And there's also going to be different business concerns at different times of the year. I mean, let's take an e-commerce account for an example, where maybe you have, hundreds of product categories and thousands of products. There's going to be certain times of the year, say the holiday time, where, you're really pushing electronics and looking for growth there, but you're probably trimming back a little bit on gardening tools because it's not the season. So there's plenty of opportunity to come out ahead and also manage to your business needs at that point. And a large account allows that to happen. So in a large account, it's always important to look at the whole, but it's even more important to look at the parts and what you need to have grow at that point and what you need to optimize at a different point.
Yeah, absolutely. Great tip, Jeff.
My next tip is, and I think that this is sort of the backbone of everything, is effective communication with your clients, your management team. Is that they need to know what the story is, what's happening. So I sort of broke this down into three areas of reporting: written and verbal updates. So we'll break this down just a little bit more, and I know Eric's going to talk about it in more detail. But reporting, I like to provide the macro and the micro level. So give them almost too much information. I've never had anyone complain about having too much data, but I've heard them complain when they don't have enough data. And also provide an account analysis along with that. So what do the numbers mean? What's happening with performance? Why are things happening the way they are? So I like to have all that together. Then I provide a written email update, and I'll couple that with the reporting and send that off. And I think it's important to have sort of that that written trail. So if it ever comes back to you, why didn't this happen or why didn't that happen, we could refer back to the email and say, hey, I explained to you, exactly what's happening in your paid search program. And then finally, to sort of close the loop, is to have verbal communication. In an ideal world, we would love to, do it face to face, but we live in sort of a scattered society where our clients are, hundreds or thousands of miles away, and Sometimes even our bosses are in different offices and people are remote. So if we can at least have a phone call to discuss verbally, you get different cues, and you can kind of read body language even through the voice to understand truly where your superiors or where your clients are at and what they need to know. So, kind of putting those three pieces together is going to make you successful and more productive, because the more effective you are communicating, the less time you have to do actually communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions I always have posed to me, especially when it comes to like managing a large account and more importantly, looking at the large amount of data found within, because I know with an account of the size that the one of the ones you manage particularly, you could have millions of lines of data in there. So how do you, I know you said you want to make sure you provide as much data as possible to the client. So how do you do that in an effective fashion where they're able to like not just get all that data, but how can you analyze that? How can you provide context for what's happening in an account with basically that much data?
Sure. So we can't give them millions of line of raw data and expect them to go through it and have an understanding. So with our reporting, we have to give 10 or 15 different looks for the report. So the big client that I manage is an education client, and they have multiple locations. So we'll give a top level, how's each campus performing, and then we'll break that down to how is each program performing within those campuses. Then they have multiple brands. We'll segment it out by the brand, and then segment out by device. How is phone, tablet, and desktop performing? And continually breaking those looks out where they can see on an ever granular level of where their performance is, so we can spot those opportunities in those areas where we can be more effective.
All right, absolutely. So there are also some other things. So I know your next point might actually be able to speak to ways in which you can provide some more detailed reporting. So yeah, so tools and technology, right?
Sure. Absolutely essential to managing a large account. So, especially for those in the audience who are doing this alone, using offline editors, they're making great strides in all the search engine interfaces, but it can take an hour to set up an account. I'm sorry, to set up a campaign, where in AdWords or Bing Editor, in 5 minutes you can have the basic shell of a campaign set up. So being able to use those editors where you can work offline and quickly be able to add keywords and move ad groups around and whatnot, excuse me, is extremely helpful time saver. The next thing, an area that I found of great value to me, is using rules, alerts, and scripts. These are sort of my eyes and ears and reinforcements all wrapped up in one. For example, I have some complex budget rules where on weekends we have to ramp budgets down, and then midnight on Monday ramp budgets back up, and also have keywords roll to the top of the page or roll down into the second or third position. So without having automated rules to do that for me, I would have to work 24 hours, 7 days a week, and I'm sure my family wouldn't like that. So I have to put something in place that's going to allow the work to happen even during the off times while we're off doing other things. And then another thing that's very valuable is alerts. So we all run into those issue of performance, sort of goes up and down, and we spend a couple of days trying to figure out why. Well, using an alert that can give you a variance, for example, in performance, whether that's positive or negative variance, I use that alert to tell me my performance went up or down 50% in a particular campaign or ad group. So I eliminate all that time trying to figure out the source of the problem. I can spend all my time resolving an issue or working on an opportunity to grow. So I highly suggest that you get alerts into your workflow so you can be notified of anything that's important to you. Scripts if you want to automate large parts of your workflow that are sort of mundane, there's some great free sites out there where you can grab scripts. And we use one, for example, for labeling, to label our ad groups or label our keywords. Just grunt work that takes a long time to do. A simple script that just runs allows for all that to happen. So great time saver. And then finally, bid management. It can get very tedious when you have millions of keywords to try to manage all those bids yourself. Um, using a third-party tool such as Acquisio or Marin or Searchforce, excuse me again, can really help you out. But even if you don't have, the budget to be able to invest in a third-party tool, using things like Google Conversion Optimizer or the flexible bid strategies can really take the load off. I will stress that if you're going to, automate your bids, it's not a set it and forget it. You're going to have to check in frequently and make sure directionally that the bids are leading to the performance that you want. But if you can kind of, tweak those settings and get everything set in, you've saved quite a bit of time for you to focus on strategy and other things you can do to really move the needle forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in terms of some of the platforms we discussed, and this even extends to like Excel, like there are automated ways for you to not just perform routine tasks in an account, but also to generate, insightful, usable reports as well. So like Excel has macros that can create templates. There's a beautiful impression sheet report that we have that we use internally that I've shown at least like 5 times to different clients of ours. And then the same goes for some of the other custom generated PDFs you can get from those other third-party platforms. So you can definitely make use of more than just bid management and then rules, alerts, and scripts with some of these platforms as well. But so Jeff, do you have any other tips for effective use? So I think you hit the big one on bid management tools and that you need to be aware, like the bids are only going to be as good as the rules you put in place. But was there anything else that comes to mind, especially when it comes to managing a large account?
I mean, it's being organized and knowing absolutely where you want to take the account. Having a clear understanding of what the goals are, if they're passed to you, or if you're making the goals yourself, absolutely have a direction of where you want to go, and also realize where you need to intervene and where you can put in, some tools and technology to help you. Knowing, where to, apply those things. And even if you're bringing in, extra help, the resources that we talked about, having a plan up front for how you want to use them. If you have a plan for the way you want to attack it, the results are going to come because you've sort of flushed all that out in the beginning. So that's my biggest thing for large account is just have a solid overall plan and have solid mini plans to address, the different areas that you need to address on how you want to execute.
Yeah, I think if nothing else today, when it comes to like our top takeaways for how to successfully manage a large account, organization and to-do lists are going to be like those are key more than anything else. I think everything Jeff and I are going to mention, like Jeff has already mentioned, a lot of it's going to be planning in advance, and I'm going to mention a lot of things that are also planning in advance and keeping a list and just being very organized because with a large account with so many moving pieces, it takes a lot to stay on top of everything. And you can only do that by making sure that you yourself are organized with both a lot of lists, but also just having a plan in place and a plan that you can fall back on and rely upon to get you where you need to go.
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head with that.
All right, so tip number 7, detailed reporting. So Jeff already touched on this in his effective communication slide, but you need to work to understand your PPC performance. So you can know your metrics, but without really providing context to your performance, you and your boss or your client are flying blind. So the context, things like you can say month over month that, oh, our click-through rate was down, but whether or not that's not really telling you anything. Like you can say your click-through rate was down by 75%, and then usually that causes somebody to freak out. But without providing the proper context for that by saying, oh, our click-through rate was down because our impression volume was way up because we added this display campaign, without that context, without that background information, you end up getting a lot of mixed signals. And again, in a webinar that's talking about organization and clear communication, mixed signals are a problem. So other ways you can work to understand your PPC performance. This is one of my favorite reports that I pull for one of my clients on a monthly basis. So this is just a basic return on ad spend report. And this is a way that we kind of work to understand our PPC performance, both in terms of conversions generated in leads, but also how those leads actually perform on the back end. And this allows us to create informed decisions about account growth. So if I know that in that account that has a $2 return on ad spend versus the one that has the $3 return on ad spend, I know that if I have the opportunity to increase my budget based on, again, what Jeff talked about with his plan to increase or decrease budget as needed, I know where that money's best spent. So detailed reporting, and again, providing context for the metrics found within, that is key to managing a large account and to making sure that you both have a great relationship with your boss, with whoever's managing you, or managing or the client that you're working with on, and providing these reports too, because this kind of information just allows for better informed decisions all across the board. And then to follow up on that with kind of a similar point, is that you need to understand your role. So understand how you fit into the bigger picture, understand the business model. So Jeff, again, touched on this when talking about bringing in outside help. Make sure that not only do they understand the business as a whole, but understand how you fit into it too. So are you lead generation? How are those leads tracked in your system? Who actually gets them, and what is the sales cycle like? So even then, so just comparing two different clients who do, just say, lead generation. You could have one that leads go to a system of a dealer network throughout the entire United States, and then those get chased down by people on a location basis. So the person nearest to them is going to handle that, as opposed to, say, like your education client, where leads go into a database and then they get pursued by, I don't know, somebody at a call center or somebody, at a college or something along those lines. So each, even with the same goal, lead generation, there could be wildly different business models that you need to understand and exactly how you fit into that, and then tailor your campaigns to that. And then it goes beyond that too, to just understanding, make sure you're getting back-end access, going beyond the click, and understanding if it's e-commerce, where you're funneling, what your margin is, how can you help hit those goals. So just kind of go beyond the click, right, Jeff?
Absolutely. And, you bring up an interesting question, Eric, with, fitting into the bigger picture. I think we've heard throughout, our time at Hanapin, clients don't always have, their goals flushed out. How do you deal with that when you're trying to figure out where you fit in and you're not getting, sort of those concrete goals? How do you go about managing the account and setting the environment for success when they're not even sure what they want?
Well, I think in that case, well, to be entirely honest, I think first and foremost, I try not to be in that situation, and I think anybody who has a lot of experience in PPC probably say the same thing, in that if you don't have defined goals, if you don't even know what your pursuit is when you're putting these ads out there into the wild, it's generally a pretty big red flag. But if you are kind of operating without a compass, without a rudder, because that's kind of akin to what it is. Like if you don't have those goals set up beforehand, it kind of speaks to what you said, where constant communication is the biggest thing, where you just need to be asking about, feedback about how how the leads or the sales, how are they performing? What is actually being provided? Just always ask for that feedback, almost over communicate. Does that make sense? And does that kind of go in line with your experience?
That does. It's a very good point, because it's very hard to try to manage a PPC account with large amount of spends if the client's not sure exactly where they want to go. You want to make sure that you're, if they want sales, you want to make sure you're chasing sales. So your explanation makes a lot of sense, and it should be well heeded.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And then, so live poll question number 3. Just keep on through the. Okay, so I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with all that, but we'll keep going. So yeah, the question is, what's your biggest pain point in managing a large account? So is it keeping track of all the moving parts? Or is it reporting, reporting? Because I know and sometimes it depends on the people you work with, the people you're working for. Reporting can be a large chunk of the work involved. Or is it maintaining account efficiency and hitting goals, or finding growth opportunities? Kind of be like a needle in a haystack. So I know for me, at least with my largest accounts, it's reporting. We definitely have a lot of reporting needs there. So bi-weekly reports on my end based on projections towards our goals, as well as sort of a weekly in-face client visit with unique reports generated on top of that. So it can be definitely difficult on that end. I rely a lot on both internal resources and some of the tools that we discussed to help me do that. But what about you, Jeff?
I would say the biggest pain point for me is just keeping track of all the moving parts. We've been able through, some automated reporting and restructuring the account to make reporting, easier and more efficient. But I never seem to get around the fact that there's 100 things going on at one time, and they're all sort of interrelated to each other, and making sure that if we do something in spot A, that we're not affecting performance in spot B. So that's something that's just an everyday battle, and just having lots of meetings with the teams to sort of flush out where we're at with things, and how performance is sort of interrelating to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we don't have any, like the live poll functionality is slightly busted right now. So, oh well, we'll move on. But I'm definitely sure that these answers resonate with at least a few of you out there. I'm pretty confident on that. But you can always do a hashtag ThinkPPC if you feel like a really strong compulsion to respond. And we'll definitely get back to you there. So the next thing is new ideas. So don't just rely on your existing campaigns for growth and optimization, or well, growth, I should say. Well, you should always have that plan for increasing and decreasing budget just for, if that's just good sense, you also need to make sure you try new things. So that speaks to the budget reallocation point that Jeff spoke about. Some may actually work even better than what you already have, and you want to make sure you have a testing plan and stick to it. We've had instances in the past where we've had clients, people who were very bought into Google search and Bing search and didn't want to try anything else, but then we test out a Google beta, or we do something with Facebook, like sponsored posts or dark posts, and totally blows away all expectations of performance, and they end up pivoting maybe 50% or more of their budget to that new source based on the success that they find there. And you don't know if you're going to have that kind of success if you don't test it beforehand. So this was a testing plan of new ideas and new growth initiatives that we pitched for a client over the last year, and some of the results that we saw from that. So this started back in Q2 of 2013. So we launched remarketing. Obvious low-hanging fruit, definitely worked. We did a Bing launch. That also worked. We did international targeting expansion. It didn't really work. We did geographic modifier optimization. So there was a bunch of bid modifiers on a state-by-state level. That helped us, again, as Jeff talked about, push and pull our optimization on a more specific level. That worked. And then we also did an account and campaign restructure, which allowed for more efficient budgeting, which also worked. So Q3 2013. We did some remarketing expansion, which didn't really work. So we got almost too specific there, didn't get any traffic, kind of ended up being a bit of a flop. We did some Facebook remarketing. I think this was with AdRoll, which worked but was low volume. We did AdWords for video and did some remarketing on YouTube, which worked but was low volume. We did some landing page tests. We got some buy-in for CRO, which really worked. And then we did some product expansion, which didn't work in that we tried the new products, got a lot of conversions for it, leads in this case, but they weren't able to ever turn them into anything. So even though it made us look great because, hey, we were getting a lot of leads, a lot of conversions, turns out they didn't end up performing very well in the back end, which also speaks to the back end tracking in that we implemented that and figured out, the return on ad spend, and it absolutely worked. It allowed us to make more informed decisions about the account. And then moving into Q4 2013, we did campaign budget increases. We did product expansion, did a display keyword campaign test with some mixed results. We did a similar users campaign, which at the time worked and has since kind of fizzled out. We did a Google beta test, which worked but was low volume. Then we unpaused some high CPA keywords as Jeff said, is one of those things where we broke and cooked. It was an emergency, broke the glass in case of emergency came up, and it didn't necessarily work. But it was a structured test, testing along each quarter different avenues of potential expansion, and ended up allowing us to expand the account from a budget perspective about twofold. And increase the lead volume in this case by threefold because of it. It was because of a structured approach to implementing new platforms that you just need to make sure you do these things on a regular basis and don't rely on what you're already doing. Because while what you have is good, I'm sure you're a lot of smart people in the office or in the audience. There's always something else out there you can potentially test. So for this particular client, Plan 2014 initiatives, doing some LinkedIn PPC, doing more Facebook PPC, as well as international efforts, doing more investment in CRO, and then talking about affinity audiences and other display beta tests, some of which most of you probably already know about, but I'm still slightly fuzzy on the NDA, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. But you know they're out there, and they're worthwhile to test, especially if you might be in, say, B2B. I don't know, potentially. But yeah, so making sure you have these ideas planned out, and also allow yourself some flexibility to test whatever comes up that might be new. And then tip number 10, just general project management. So this is just another general tip and kind of goes in line with what we've been talking about so far, but I really hope you guys like to-do lists. I love to-do lists. I keep just a giant, it's a post-it note full of my to-dos that I pretty much update on a daily basis. It's pretty low tech, but it's also an ever-present reminder of all the stuff that I need to do. And you don't need software for this, not necessarily. I know here we use Basecamp. Some people also use Outlook calendars and other different project management softwares out there. Like there's a ton out there, but it can help. And then plan in advance, much like the budget increasing and decreasing or the planned initiatives. A little bit of foresight here can give you and your team the time you need to handle a large task. But conversely, you also want to be flexible because the best laid plans often go awry. So you want to leave yourself some flexibility to handle top priority tasks. Now, the difference between a small account and a large account is that a small account, I mean, you can definitely spend a lot of time on them, but there's going to be some time just naturally occurring where it'll be downtime, flexibility to handle top priority things. Whereas with a large account, you're juggling so many things and the account can be so expansive and has so many different things going on in it. You could theoretically plan out every single hour of every single day, and I know in some cases you probably have, Jeff, but you still need to leave yourself some time, some flexibility to handle whatever might come up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Eric, about being flexible. When you're building your project list is to build that extra time in. If you think you can get a project done in 3 days, you're better off giving yourself a 5-day time range just because there's any number of things that can happen post-launch, that could affect performance that, you want to account for in QA and whatnot beforehand. So, yeah, definitely leave that cushion in there for you. I've learned from experience myself where you try to move from one project to the next too fast, and then you have to revisit project number one because, an important step was missed along the way. It just takes away from the time of getting project 2 underway, and then it creates that snowball effect. So I'm glad that you brought that up. It's just so important, especially in the large accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so another thing that's important for large accounts is to be proactive. So pulling reports can be useful for you too, because the analysis involved can alert you to performance issues. And this is really just a general tip, pretty much for everything in life, but it also applies to PPC. Don't let things slide in the hopes that they go unnoticed. You want to make sure that you point it out, offer an explanation, and more importantly, say what you'll do about it. More like with a large account, especially if you're working with large budgets, not just in terms of the scope of the account and the number of keywords, but also the amount of money you're spending on it. Whoever is trusting you with that, they want to make sure that you've got a handle on things. They want to make sure, they want to be able to trust you. They don't want to have to worry about the marketing budget that they're giving your, like putting your way. So make sure that when you see something pop up, like you say, like you see a dip in conversion rate, or you see a dip in click-through rate, even though impressions are stable, you're saying, well, we're going to test more ad copy, or just being able to be proactive, offer context for the things that you're observing in your reports, and then be proactive about offering a solution to it, and just let people know that you've got this. So habit number one, be proactive, be in charge of your account, um, and make sure that whoever's relying on you to handle this knows that you have a solid handle on the account. And you do that by being proactive and not necessarily looking for issues everywhere that pop up, but being ready to take accountability for these things. What's that? Yeah. And then, so lastly, you also want to make sure to read between the lines. So this kind of borders on paranoia just a little bit. But you want to be sure to ask questions. If your boss or your client isn't necessarily enthused about what you're enthused about, dig deeper. So if you go to somebody and say, hey, we had more conversions than ever this month. We got you so many leads. Man, you guys must just be doing great. Well, well, that should be good, like in and on its face. If they say, yeah, but you want to make sure to dig deeper because you may not be speaking to what their real goals or priorities are. Like I know, Jeff, you've had a lot of experience dealing with clients, maybe even especially as of late, who they've had great conversion volume, but their goals are something different. So it might be a cost per sale in the back end, or a cost per deal, or a cost per student in a seat, or maybe return on ad spend isn't necessarily where they want it to be. You need to make sure you know what their real goals and priorities are. Because often, like a lack of an emotional response to that kind of news can be, like, it can be really good at disclosing that kind of issue when that comes up. And really just figuring out, hey, what's really upsetting you? Is it you? Is it me? Jeff, I know you have some pretty strong opinions on this particular topic.
Yeah, I mean, it you know, part of the job is psychology and understanding what, our bosses want, our uh, clients want, and sometimes it's not necessarily in the numbers, it's somewhere in between. It's really flushing out, what they really want their end result to be. We can bring in conversions, we can bring in leads, but if they're not, turning into clients or sales or whatnot, then there could be a real frustration in the business. So, always dig deeper, like Eric said. Always find out what the real end result is supposed to be. What we do often is the beginning. It's not the it's not the end. So we need to really be mindful at and really understand with our clients, what it is that what it is that they want to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So great feedback from a savvy veteran. I should all be taking a lot of notes. I know I have. So yeah, we have is our poll still working? Oh, it is now? Okay. So would you like help with your PPC accounts and management? I'm interested in, okay, so PPC management, where we handle the day-to-day management of your PPC account. We also have an account audit where we review your account for optimizations. The PPC retainer, where we handle only specific needs within your account, as well as a free, emphasis on free, solutions blueprint, where we look at your account and provide analysis and consultation, which is for accounts with more than 20,000 in ad spend. So we're going to let that roll while we move on to the next portion of the Q&A. So it's live Q&A time. So Jeff, I have a question for you. So do you use any rules/scripts or flexible bidding strategies applied across multiple accounts and or campaigns?
Sure. We use rules that go across the entire account. For instance, our brand keywords. We want to, manage those consistently to be at the top of the page. So that's not going to be necessarily campaign specific. So, having the rule in place, prevents a lot of, just manual bidding and checking on those keywords. And then, scripts for things like, labeling, for example. We usually run those, campaign by campaign. They can be run account wide, but we just choose to use it on a little bit of a tighter scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I personally, like I make use of both some flexible bidding rules as well as like variable conversion optimizer targets across multiple campaigns with different goals, especially one of my large e-commerce accounts where they have like basically different targets based on profitability of different products, where I'll just use different rules because they have different goals. So I think that's the most important thing, is to make sure that whatever you're using, rules or scripts or bidding strategies, that they're in pursuit of the goals and that they're in line with the goals as well. And then Jeff, we had another question come in for you. And I know you had some experience with this. So we have a situation where most of our leads are phone calls, and we have multiple phone lines on our website. This makes it difficult to track conversions at the keyword level. Do you have any suggestions on how to handle this, since so much of what you talked about comes down to looking at the bottom line dollars?
Sure. Well, there are systems out there that are they're call tracking systems, which allows you to track those phone numbers down to the keyword level. I've worked a little bit with Mongoose Metrics, and people within Hanapin have worked with If by Phone, and I believe that those tools are not terribly expensive, but I'm not exactly sure what the costs are. Very helpful. You get great insights. For example, with Mongoose Metrics, we were able to not only track the keyword, but the query. I'm not sure if that'll happen anymore the way Google is clamping down. But it does give you that a little insight into that blind spot of what happens offline with the phone, because we know that it's so important to us, and we absolutely have to know what's going on so we can optimize to those phone leads.
Yeah, absolutely, and a great tip. And I know I've used If by Phone myself to get that similar level of data. Looks like we don't have any other Q&A questions, at least not right now, but that's probably for the best because we're pretty much out of time. So if you have more questions, you can always reach out to us at PPC Hero or #ThinkPPC. But first and foremost, we wanted to thank you for attending our webinar. Again, if you want to get a free solutions blueprint from Hanapin Marketing, which is for accounts greater than $20,000 a month in ad spend, you can go to www.hanapinmarketing.com/solutions blueprint signup. Or if you want to contact us directly with webinar feedback or webinar suggestions, you can always reach out to marketing@hanapinmarketing.com. So again, I wanted to thank you very much for attending with us today. Jeff, do you have any last words for our attendees?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Eric.
Myself, my name is Eric Couch, account manager here at Hanapin Marketing. And again, I just want to give the overview. Remember, to-do lists, organization, and planning. And you'll find plenty of success with your large accounts if you just stick to some of those basic tenets. So thank you very much, and thanks for attending.